The gunshot cracked through the California twilight, and Catherine Owens threw herself behind the supply wagon as 3 more men emerged from the chaparral surrounding her camp outside San Jose. She had been traveling alone for 8 days now, making her way from her father's ranch in the foothills down to the bustling town where she hoped to sell her leather goods at the market. It was 1882, and women traveling alone were not entirely uncommon anymore, but they were still vulnerable. Catherine had known the risks when she left, had packed her father's old revolver and enough ammunition to see her through any trouble. What she had not anticipated was that the weapon would be stolen while she bathed in the creek that morning, leaving her defenseless when these men found her camp as the sun began its descent. "Now, miss, we are not looking for any trouble," the largest of them called out, his voice thick with false courtesy. "We just want whatever money you got, and maybe a bit of your company for the evening." Catherine's heart hammered against her ribs. There were 5 of them now, she could see, all rough-looking characters with the kind of sun-weathered faces that spoke of hard living and harder intentions. She pressed herself against the wagon wheel, her mind racing through options that seemed to narrow with each passing second. "I have nothing worth taking," she called back, trying to keep her voice steady. "Just some leather goods I am hoping to sell. You can have them all, just leave me be." The men laughed, a sound that made her skin crawl. They were spreading out, she realized, circling around the wagon to cut off any escape route. Her hands trembled as she reached for anything that might serve as a weapon, finding only a leather-working knife that would be useless against 5 armed men. That was when she heard the hoofbeats. They came fast and purposeful, and the men surrounding her camp turned toward the sound. Catherine risked a glance around the wagon and saw a lone rider approaching, his silhouette dark against the orange-streaked sky. He sat tall in the saddle, and even from a distance, there was something commanding about his presence that made her breath catch. The rider slowed as he reached the edge of her camp, his horse, a magnificent bay gelding that danced sideways, sensing the tension in the air. The man himself was younger than Catherine expected, perhaps in his late 20s, with dark hair that curled slightly beneath his wide-brimmed hat. His face was angular and sun-bronzed, his jaw set in a hard line as he took in the scene before him. "Evening, friend," the large man said, his hand resting casually on his gun belt. "Best move along. This does not concern you." The cowboy's eyes, Catherine noticed, were a startling shade of gray-blue, and they swept over the men with the kind of assessment that spoke of experience. When his gaze found her crouched behind the wagon, something flickered in those eyes, gone too quickly for her to name. "The lady will be coming with me now," he said, his voice carrying an authority that seemed to fill the entire camp. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Catherine felt her pulse quicken for an entirely different reason now. She did not know this man, had no idea whether he was any better than the 5 surrounding her, but something in his tone made her want to trust him. "I do not think so," the large man said, and his hand moved closer to his gun. "We found her first. She is not a lost wallet," the cowboy replied, and there was steel beneath the calm of his words. "And I am not asking." The tension stretched taut as a bowstring. Catherine could see the men calculating, weighing their numbers against this single rider. The cowboy sat perfectly still, his hand resting on his thigh close to his own weapon, and there was something in his stillness that was more threatening than any aggressive posture. "You know who I am?" the cowboy asked, and his voice was conversational now, almost friendly. "Name is Austin Vance. I ride for the Hammond Ranch, and Sheriff Morrison is a personal friend. Now, I could ride into San Jose and bring him back here with a dozen deputies, or we could settle this peaceable like right now. Your choice." Catherine saw the recognition flicker across several of the men's faces. She had heard the name Hammond, one of the largest ranches in the region, employing dozens of hands and wielding considerable influence in the county. The large man's jaw worked, clearly unhappy, but also clearly thinking better of his options. "There are 5 of us," he said, but his tone had lost some of its certainty. "There are," Austin Vance agreed. "And I would likely only get 3 of you before you got me. Question is, which 3? You feeling lucky?" He leaned forward slightly in his saddle. "Because I promise you, you would be one of them." The silence that followed was broken only by the nervous shifting of horses and the distant call of a hawk. Catherine held her breath, her fingers white-knuckled around the leather knife. Finally, the large man spat into the dust. "Come on," he muttered to his companions. "She is not worth the trouble." They backed away slowly, keeping their hands visible, and Catherine watched as they disappeared into the chaparral the same way they had come. She remained frozen behind the wagon, not quite believing it was over, until Austin Vance dismounted with an easy grace and walked toward her. "You can come out now, miss," he said, and his voice was gentler than when he had addressed the men. "They are gone." Catherine stood on shaking legs, still clutching the knife. Now that she could see him properly, she realized he was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and the lean, muscular build of someone who made his living through physical work. His face, she noticed, was striking rather than handsome, all strong lines and sharp edges, but his eyes held a warmth that contradicted the hardness of his features. "Thank you," she managed, her voice coming out smaller than she intended. "I do not know what they would have done if you had not come along." "I reckon you do know," Austin said quietly. "That is why you look ready to bolt like a spooked filly." He held up his hands, showing them empty. "I am not going to hurt you, miss, I give you my word." She wanted to believe him, and perhaps that was dangerous in itself. Catherine had always been told she was too trusting, too quick to see the good in people. It was a trait her father had worried over, especially after her mother died and left her the only woman on their small ranch. "My name is Catherine Owens," she said, making herself stand straighter despite the trembling in her limbs. "I am traveling to San Jose to sell leather goods at the market." "Alone?" Austin asked, and there was no judgment in his tone, only concern. "My father was meant to come with me, but he took ill the day before we were to leave. The market only comes twice a year, and we need the money from the sales." She gestured helplessly at the camp around them. "I thought I could manage. I had a gun, but they took it this morning when I was away from camp." Austin nodded slowly, his eyes scanning the camp with a practiced assessment. "You have done well to make it this far. San Jose is only about 3 miles from here. You were close." "But those men, they watch the road this time of year, looking for easy targets." He met her gaze. "I will ride with you into town if you would like. My business there can wait until I see you safely to wherever you are going." Catherine knew she should be wary, should perhaps refuse and take her chances on her own. But the sun was nearly set, and the thought of spending another night alone on the road, knowing those men might return, made her decision simple. "I would appreciate that," she said. "Thank you, Mr. Vance." "Austin," he corrected with a small smile. "Mr. Vance is my father, and he is meaner than a rattlesnake with a toothache. You would not want to get us confused." Despite everything, Catherine found herself almost smiling. "Austin, then. And I am Catherine, though most people call me Kate." "Catherine is a fine name," Austin said, and there was something in the way he said it that made warmth bloom in her chest. "We should get your camp packed up. I would rather not be out here after full dark." They worked together in the fading light, Austin moving with an efficiency that spoke of years on the trail. He helped her load her goods into the wagon. and Catherine was acutely aware of his presence, the way his shoulders flexed beneath his shirt as he lifted the heavier items, the careful way he handled her leather work, as if understanding the value of it. "These are fine pieces," he commented, examining a saddle bag she had tooled with an intricate pattern of oak leaves. "You do this work yourself?" "My mother taught me," Catherine said, securing a trunk to the wagon bed. She learned from her father, who was a saddle maker in Boston before they came west. "It is one of the few things she left me when she died." Austin was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "My mother died when I was 14, he said, "left me her Bible and her wedding ring. I sold the ring to keep food on the table that winter." He looked at her with understanding in his eyes. "Sometimes survival means letting go of things, but the skills they teach us, those stay forever." There was something in that moment, standing in the gathering darkness with this stranger who somehow did not feel like a stranger at all, that made Catherine's heart do an odd little skip. She found herself wondering about him, about the life that had led him to this moment, to her camp, at precisely the right time. They finished packing as the first stars began to appear, and Austin helped her hitch her horse to the wagon. His hands brushed hers as they worked the buckles, and Catherine felt a spark at the contact that had nothing to do with fear. "You can ride in the wagon," Austin said, swinging back up onto his bay gelding. "I will scout ahead, make sure the road is clear." The ride into San Jose was uneventful, though Catherine remained tense the entire way, half expecting the men to reappear from the darkness. But Austin rode ahead with the confidence of someone who feared very little, and his presence was oddly comforting. The town was larger than Catherine had expected, bustling even in the evening hours with miners, ranchers, and merchants going about their business. Gas lamps lit the main street, and she could hear piano music drifting from one of the saloons. Austin guided her to a respectable-looking boarding house on a quieter side street, where a painted sign advertised rooms for ladies. "Miss Gertrude runs a clean establishment," Austin explained as he helped her down from the wagon. "She does not allow any nonsense, and her husband is a retired marshal. You will be safe here." Catherine looked up at the neat white building with its flower boxes in the windows and felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. "How much do I owe you?" she asked, reaching for her small purse. "For your help, I mean. I do not have much, but I can pay something." Austin looked almost offended. "You do not owe me anything," he said firmly. "I did what any decent person would do." "Not everyone would have stopped," Catherine said quietly. "Most men would have ridden on, not wanting the trouble." Their eyes met in the lamplight, and Catherine felt that strange skip in her heartbeat again. Austin's expression was unreadable, but there was an intensity in his gaze that made her feel seen in a way she had never experienced before. "I could not have lived with myself if I had ridden on," he said simply. Before Catherine could respond, the door to the boarding house opened, and a plump woman in her 50s appeared, her gray hair pinned in a neat bun. "Austin Vance," she said with obvious pleasure. "What brings you to town?" "And who is this young lady?" "Evening, Miss Gertrude," Austin said, his face breaking into a genuine smile. "This is Catherine Owens. She had some trouble on the road, and I was hoping you might have a room for her." Miss Gertrude's expression immediately shifted to concern. "Trouble? Oh, you poor dear. Of course I have a room. Come in, come in." She bustled down the steps, already clucking over Catherine like a mother hen. "Austin, you are a good boy. Your mother would be proud." Austin ducked his head slightly, looking almost embarrassed, and Catherine found the gesture endearing. Together, they helped her carry her goods into the boarding house, where Miss Gertrude showed her to a small but clean room on the second floor. "The market opens at dawn," Miss Gertrude informed her. My husband can help you get your wagon set up if you like. He knows all the best spots." "That would be wonderful," Catherine said gratefully. She turned to Austin, who was standing in the doorway looking like he was trying to figure out how to say goodbye. "Thank you again. I truly do not know what would have happened if you had not come along." "Just glad I was there," Austin said. He hesitated, then added, "The market will be busy tomorrow. If you would like, I could come by, help you with the heavy lifting and such. I know most of the ranchers and businessmen in town. Might be able to send some customers your way." Catherine felt that warmth in her chest again. "I would not want to take you away from your business. It is just a supply run," Austin said with a shrug. "Nothing that cannot wait. Besides," and here his eyes held hers with an intensity that made her breath catch, "I would like to make sure you are settled properly. Consider it being neighborly." "Then yes," Catherine said, surprising herself with how much she wanted to see him again. "I would appreciate the help." Austin smiled, a real smile that transformed his face from striking to genuinely handsome. "I will be by at dawn then. Sleep well, Catherine." He left, and Catherine found herself standing in her little room, listening to his footsteps fade down the stairs and out into the night. Miss Gertrude appeared in the doorway with fresh linens and a knowing look. "That Austin is a good man," she said, beginning to make up the bed. "Known him since he was a boy. His father was a mean drunk who worked him half to death, but Austin pulled himself up by his bootstraps. Now he is the foreman at the Hammond Ranch, one of the most respected men in the county." Catherine helped with the linens, absorbing this information. "He seems very capable. Capable and kind, a rare combination," Miss Gertrude said. "He is not married either, though Lord knows half the women in town have tried. He is particular about who he spends his time with." She gave Catherine a meaningful look. "Very particular." Catherine felt her cheeks warm and was grateful for the dim lamplight. He was just being helpful. "Hum," Miss Gertrude said, sounding thoroughly unconvinced. "Well, you rest up, dear. Tomorrow will be a busy day." After Miss Gertrude left, Catherine changed into her nightgown and lay in the unfamiliar bed, staring at the ceiling. Her body was exhausted, but her mind would not stop replaying the events of the evening. She kept seeing Austin's face, the way his eyes had assessed the threat, and then softened when he looked at her, the strength in his hands as he helped with her wagon, the surprising gentleness in his voice. She barely knew him, she reminded herself. He was just a cowboy who had done a good deed. She would see him tomorrow, thank him again, and then their paths would likely never cross again. She would return to her father's ranch, and Austin would continue his life at the Hammond place, and that would be that. But even as she told herself this, Catherine could not quite make herself believe it. Something had shifted when their eyes met in her camp, something she did not fully understand but could not deny. And as she finally drifted off to sleep, it was Austin's gray-blue eyes that followed her into her dreams. Dawn came early, light streaming through the thin curtains of her room. Catherine dressed quickly in her best day dress, a simple blue cotton that her father said matched her eyes, and pinned her dark blonde hair into a neat coil at the nape of her neck. Her hands were steadier today, the terror of yesterday fading into something more manageable in the bright morning light. Miss Gertrude had breakfast waiting, thick slices of bread with butter and jam, eggs, and strong coffee. Catherine ate quickly, eager to get to the market and set up her stall. Her goods represented months of work, and the money from their sale would mean the difference between a comfortable winter and a difficult one for her and her father. She was loading her wagon when Austin appeared, riding his bay gelding and leading a second horse, a sturdy-looking sorrel mare. He dismounted with that same easy grace she remembered from the night before, and Catherine found herself smiling before she could stop herself. "Morning," he said, touching the brim of his hat. In the daylight, she could see him even more clearly. He wore clean denim pants, a dark blue shirt that brought out the color of his eyes, and a leather vest that had seen better days but was well maintained. His face was freshly shaven, and she caught the faint scent of soap as he moved past her to inspect the wagon. "Good morning," she replied. "You did not have to bring another horse. Thought you might like to ride instead of sitting on the wagon bench," Austin explained. "Your horse can pull the wagon easier without a rider, and this is Daisy. She is gentle as a lamb, perfect for a lady." Catherine felt touched by his thoughtfulness. "That is very kind." "Practical, more like," Austin said, but there was a hint of pleasure in his expression that suggested he was glad she appreciated the gesture. With Austin's help, they made quick work of getting to the market square, a large open area in the center of town where merchants and craftspeople were already setting up their stalls. Austin seemed to know everyone, exchanging greetings and introducing Catherine to what felt like half the town. She noticed the respect in people's voices when they spoke to him, the way men shook his hand firmly and women smiled warmly. He helped her set up her stall, arranging her leather goods to best advantage, and Catherine could not help but notice the care he took with each piece. His hands, she saw, were scarred and calloused from years of hard work, but they handled her delicate tooling with surprising gentleness. "You have a good eye for display," she commented as he stepped back to assess their work. "My mother used to sell preserves and needlework at markets like this," Austin said. "I would help her set up. She taught me that how you show your work is almost as important as the work itself." As the market filled with customers, Austin proved invaluable. He steered ranchers and businessmen to her stall, pointing out the quality of her work, and Catherine found herself making sales faster than she had dared hope. But more than his practical help, she found herself simply enjoying his company. He had a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard, making her laugh at unexpected moments, and a way of observing people that was both insightful and kind. Around midday, when the market was at its busiest, a well-dressed man in his 40s approached the stall. He had the bearing of someone important, and Catherine noticed Austin straighten slightly beside her. "Mr. Hammond," Austin said respectfully, "I did not expect to see you in town today." "Austin," the man replied with a warm smile, "I heard you were here and wanted to catch you. We have some issues with the north pasture fence that need your attention." His eyes moved to Catherine with interest. "But I see you are otherwise engaged." "Sir, this is Catherine Owens," Austin said. "Catherine, this is Mr. Robert Hammond, owner of the Hammond Ranch." "Pleased to meet you," Catherine said, conscious of the scrutiny in Hammond's gaze. "The pleasure is mine," Hammond replied. "These are fine goods. Are you a local craftswoman?" "My father has a small ranch in the foothills," Catherine explained. "I learned leatherwork from my mother." Hammond examined a saddle she had made, running his hands over the stitching and tooling with the eye of someone who knew quality when he saw it. "Excellent work. I would like to commission several pieces for the ranch, if you are taking orders." Catherine felt her heart leap. A commission from the Hammond Ranch could set her up for months. "I would be honored." They discussed details while Austin stood quietly beside her, and Catherine was acutely aware of his presence. When Hammond finally left with a promise to send specific requirements by the end of the week, she turned to Austin with barely contained excitement. "That is incredible," she said. "Thank you. I know you must have said something to him." Austin shook his head. "I did not say anything. Your work speaks for itself. Mr. Hammond knows quality, and he does not do business out of charity." "Still," Catherine insisted, "if you had not brought me here, if you had not helped me set up, he might never have seen my stall." Their eyes met, and Catherine felt that now familiar skip in her heartbeat. Austin looked like he wanted to say something, but before he could, a commotion near the center of the market drew their attention. A crowd was gathering around what appeared to be an argument between two men. Catherine could see one of them pushing the other, voices rising in anger. She felt Austin tense beside her, his body shifting into an alert readiness that reminded her of the night before. "Stay here," he said quietly, and then he was moving through the crowd with purposeful strides. Catherine ignored his instruction, following at a safe distance. She could see now that one of the men was young, barely more than a boy, with the lean, hungry look of someone down on his luck. The other was older, heavyset, and clearly drunk despite the early hour. "You calling me a cheat?" The drunk man was shouting, his hand hovering near his gun. "I am saying the cards were marked," the young man replied, his voice shaking but defiant. "I am saying you took my last dollar with a crooked game." The drunk man's hand moved to his gun, and Catherine felt her breath catch in her throat. But Austin was suddenly there, stepping between them with a calm authority that seemed to freeze everyone in place. "Now, gentlemen," Austin said, his voice carrying clearly through the suddenly quiet crowd. "No need for gunplay in the middle of a market. There are ladies and children present." "This does not concern you, Vance," the drunk man said, but there was uncertainty in his tone. "When someone draws a gun in a public space, it concerns everyone," Austin replied. His voice was still calm, but there was steel underneath. "Pete, you are drunk and you are being foolish. Go sleep it off before you do something you will regret." "The boy called me a cheat," Pete said, but he sounded less certain now. "And maybe he is right, maybe he is wrong," Austin said. "But either way, it is not worth killing someone over. Now, I am asking you nicely to put the gun away and go home. Do not make me ask less nicely." For a long moment, Pete wavered. Catherine could see the calculations running through his drunken mind, weighing his pride against the very real threat Austin represented. Finally, he spat into the dust and holstered his gun. "This is not over," he muttered, but he was already walking away, the crowd parting to let him through. Austin turned to the young man, who was trembling now that the danger had passed. "You all right, son?" "Yes, sir," the boy said. "Thank you. I needed that money, and he cheated me fair as day." Austin reached into his pocket and pulled out some coins. "Here, get yourself a meal and stay away from card games with men like Pete. If you need work, come out to the Hammond Ranch tomorrow. We can always use an extra hand, especially during harvest." The young man's eyes widened. "Really, I mean yes, sir, I will. Thank you, sir." As the crowd dispersed, Austin returned to Catherine's stall, looking faintly embarrassed by the attention. "Sorry about that," he said. "I did not mean to cause a scene." "You stopped someone from getting hurt, maybe killed," Catherine said, looking at him with new understanding. "That is nothing to apologize for. Part of the job," Austin said with a shrug. "Mr. Hammond expects his foreman to help keep the peace when we are in town. Besides," and here his expression darkened slightly, "I have seen too many young men die over stupid disagreements. If I can stop it, I will." Catherine wanted to ask what he had seen, what experiences had shaped him into the man standing before her, but the market was growing crowded again, and customers were approaching her stall. The afternoon passed in a blur of sales and conversations, and Catherine was thrilled to discover that she had sold more than half her inventory by the time the market began to close for the day. Austin helped her pack up, loading the remaining goods back into the wagon with the same careful attention he had shown that morning. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and Catherine found herself not wanting the day to end. "Thank you for today," she said as they finished securing the last trunk. "I could not have managed so well without you." "You would have done fine," Austin said, but there was pleasure in his eyes at her words. "You have a gift, Catherine. People recognize that." They stood in the fading light, and Catherine felt the air between them charge with something unspoken. Austin seemed to be struggling with some internal debate, his jaw working slightly in a way she was beginning to recognize as a sign of deep thought. "I should get you back to Miss Gertrude's," he finally said. "Yes," Catherine agreed, though she made no move toward the wagon. "Catherine," Austin said, and the way he said her name made her heart race. "I know we only just met, and I do not want to presume anything, but I would like to see you again. Not just to help with your business," he added quickly. "I mean, I would like to spend time with you, if that would be agreeable." Catherine felt a smile spread across her face, genuine and unreserved. "That would be very agreeable." Relief washed over Austin's features. "I need to head back to the ranch tonight. There is business that cannot wait, but I could come back to town the day after tomorrow if that suits you. Maybe we could have dinner or take a walk, whatever you would prefer." "I would like that very much," Catherine said softly. They rode back to Miss Gertrude's in comfortable silence, but it was a different kind of silence than the night before. This one was full of possibility, of anticipation, of the fragile beginning of something neither of them quite dared to name yet. At the boarding house, Austin helped her unload the wagon and carry her goods inside. Miss Gertrude appeared, took one look at their faces, and smiled knowingly but mercifully said nothing. "The day after tomorrow, then," Austin said, standing on the porch steps, his hat in his hands. "I will be here," Catherine promised. She watched him ride away into the gathering darkness, and only when he was completely out of sight did she turn and go inside. Miss Gertrude was waiting with tea and an expectant expression. "So," the older woman said, settling into a chair in the parlor, "how was your day at the market?" "Profitable," Catherine said, unable to keep the smile from her face. "Very profitable." "I meant with Austin," Miss Gertrude said with exaggerated patience. Catherine felt her cheeks warm. "He was very helpful, and he asked to see me again. Did he now?" Miss Gertrude looked thoroughly delighted. Well, I told you he was particular about who he spent time with." The next day passed slowly for Catherine. She worked on fulfilling the few custom orders she had taken at the market, her hands busy with familiar work while her mind wandered to gray-blue eyes and strong hands, and a voice that made her feel safe. She caught herself daydreaming more than once, nearly botching a piece of tooling because she was thinking about the way Austin had smiled when she laughed at one of his observations. She was being foolish, she told herself. She barely knew him. They had spent one day together, nothing more. But no matter how much she tried to be rational about it, she could not deny the flutter in her chest when she thought about seeing him again. Miss Gertrude noticed, of course, and teased her gently about it, but there was kindness in her teasing. "Nothing wrong with a little romance," the older woman said over dinner that evening. "Life is too short and too hard out here not to grab happiness when it presents itself." The day after tomorrow arrived with agonizing slowness. Catherine changed her dress 3 times, finally settling on a green cotton dress that Miss Gertrude assured her brought out the color of her eyes. She pinned her hair up carefully, leaving a few curls loose to frame her face, and tried not to pace the parlor as she waited. Austin arrived precisely when he said he would, cleaned up and looking almost nervous. He had brought flowers, wildflowers picked from the hills, and he presented them with an awkward formality that Catherine found endearing. "These are lovely," she said, burying her face in the blooms to hide her pleased smile. They walked through the town, Austin pointing out landmarks and telling her stories about the area's history. He had a way of making even ordinary things interesting, and Catherine found herself hanging on his words. They had dinner at a small restaurant, nothing fancy but clean and welcoming, and conversation flowed easily between them. Catherine learned that Austin had come to California when he was 16, leaving behind an abusive father in Texas and making his own way through a combination of hard work and determination. He had started as a ranch hand, working his way up through sheer competence and reliability until Mr. Hammond had made him foreman 3 years ago. "I owe everything to Mr. Hammond," Austin said, pushing food around his plate. "He gave me a chance when no one else would. Saw something in me I did not see in myself." "He saw what I see," Catherine said softly. "A good man who cares about doing right." Austin looked at her, something vulnerable in his expression. "I try," he said simply. In turn, Catherine told him about her life, about growing up on a small ranch with parents who loved each other fiercely and taught her to value independence and hard work. She spoke about her mother's death 3 years ago, the lung fever that had taken her quickly despite all their efforts, and the way her father had seemed to shrink after, as if losing his wife had diminished him. "He is a good man, my father," Catherine said. "But he has never been the same since she died. I think a part of him died with her." "That is real love," Austin said quietly, "the kind that leaves a mark when it is gone." Their eyes met across the table, and Catherine felt something settle in her chest, a certainty she had not expected. It was too soon, too fast, but she could not deny what she was feeling. This man, this cowboy who had ridden into her life at exactly the right moment, had captured something in her that she had not known was waiting to be claimed. After dinner, they walked along the edge of town, watching the sun set over the hills. Austin told her about the ranch, about the cattle drives and the endless work of keeping thousands of acres maintained, and Catherine shared her dreams of expanding her leather business, maybe even opening a small shop one day. "You could do it," Austin said with conviction. "You have the skill and the drive. You just need the opportunity." "Opportunities are hard to come by for women," Catherine pointed out. "That does not make it right," Austin said, and there was an edge of anger in his voice that surprised her. "My mother was one of the smartest people I ever knew, but she never got a chance to be anything more than someone's wife and mother. She deserved better." They stopped walking, standing on a small rise that overlooked the town. The gas lamps were being lit, creating a constellation of warm light below them. Austin turned to face her, and in the twilight his eyes were very blue. "Catherine," he said, his voice low and serious, "I know this is fast and maybe I am being a fool, but I need to tell you something." Her heart was pounding. "What is it?" "I have not been able to stop thinking about you since I first saw you in that camp," Austin said. "I know we barely know each other, but I feel like I have been waiting for you without knowing I was waiting. Does that make any sense?" "Yes," Catherine breathed. "It makes perfect sense because I feel the same way." Austin reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, and cupped her face gently in his hand. His palm was warm and slightly rough, and Catherine leaned into the touch. "Can I kiss you?" he asked, and the fact that he asked, that he gave her the choice, made Catherine love him just a little bit more. "Yes," she said again, and then his lips were on hers, gentle and questioning. The kiss was everything a first kiss should be, sweet and tender with an undercurrent of something deeper, something that promised more. When they finally pulled apart, Catherine was breathless, her fingers clutching the front of Austin's shirt. "Oh," she said, which was not particularly articulate but was all she could manage. Austin smiled, really smiled, and it transformed his entire face. "Oh," he agreed. They walked back to Miss Gertrude's hand in hand, neither of them speaking much but not needing to. Words felt inadequate for what was passing between them, for the connection that had formed so quickly but felt so right. At the boarding house steps, Austin reluctantly released her hand. "I have to go back to the ranch tomorrow," he said, "but I will write to you if that is all right. And I can come back to town in a week, maybe take you out again." "I would like that," Catherine said, "both the letters and seeing you again." Austin hesitated, then said, "I know you need to get back to your father's ranch soon. When are you planning to leave?" Catherine had been trying not to think about that. "In a few days, I suppose. I need to get back to help him, and I have this commission from Mr. Hammond to work on." "The ranch is not far from your father's place," Austin said. "Maybe a few hours' ride. I could come visit if you and your father would be amenable." Hope bloomed in Catherine's chest. "I would like that very much. And my father, he is a good man. I think he would like you." They said their goodnights, and Catherine floated into the boarding house feeling like her feet barely touched the ground. Miss Gertrude took one look at her face and laughed. "Well," she said, "I do not need to ask how the evening went." The next few days passed in a blur of work and anticipation. Catherine received the detailed specifications for the Hammond commission and began planning the pieces she would create. A letter arrived from Austin, written in a careful, slightly awkward hand that made her smile. He wrote about the ranch, about a new colt that had been born, about how he kept finding his thoughts drifting to her at odd moments. Catherine wrote back, telling him about her work, about her plans to return home, about how she kept touching her lips and remembering their kiss. She was more forward in her letter than she would have dared to be in person, something about the distance making her brave. When it was time to leave San Jose, Catherine felt torn. The town had become special to her, not because of the place itself, but because of what had happened there. Miss Gertrude hugged her goodbye and made her promise to write. "You take care of that heart of yours," the older woman said. "Austin is a good man, but love is always a risk. Just make sure it is a risk worth taking." "I think it is," Catherine said softly. The ride back to her father's ranch was uneventful, giving Catherine plenty of time to think. She tried to be rational about her feelings, to tell herself that she needed to slow down, to be sensible. But rationality seemed to have very little to do with what was happening in her heart. Her father, Thomas Owens, was waiting when she arrived, and Catherine was shocked by how much frailer he looked than when she had left less than 2 weeks ago. He was only in his 50s, but grief and loneliness had aged him prematurely. "Katie, girl," he said, embracing her tightly. "I have been worried sick about you." "I am fine, Papa," she assured him. "Better than fine. I have so much to tell you." Over dinner, Catherine told him about the market, about the sales she had made and the commission from the Hammond ranch. She told him about the men who had threatened her, watching his face pale with fear and anger, and then about Austin's rescue. "I want to meet this young man," Thomas said firmly. "Any man who helped my daughter deserves my thanks." Catherine took a deep breath. "You will, Papa. He wants to come visit if that is all right with you." Thomas studied her face, and something shifted in his expression. "This is more than just gratitude, is it not?" "I think it might be," Catherine admitted quietly. Her father was silent for a long moment, his weathered hands folded on the table. Finally, he sighed. "Your mother would know what to say right now. I am just a rough old rancher who does not understand matters of the heart." "Mama would say to follow my heart," Catherine said. "She would say that life is too short not to grab happiness when we find it." "She would," Thomas agreed with a sad smile. "She was always braver than me about such things. All right, Katie, this Austin can come visit and I will take his measure. But if I do not like what I see, I will send him packing. That is my right as your father." "That is fair," Catherine said, though she was not worried. She knew Austin and her father would get along. True to his word, Austin rode up to the Owens ranch 3 days later, sitting tall on his bay gelding and looking nervous in a way that Catherine found adorable. She had been watching for him all morning, and she rushed out to meet him before he even dismounted. "You came," she said, suddenly feeling shy. "I said I would," Austin replied, swinging down from his horse. His eyes swept over her, warm and appreciating. "I missed you." "I missed you too," Catherine admitted. Her father appeared on the porch, and Catherine saw Austin square his shoulders, preparing to face paternal scrutiny. She made introductions, watching as the two men sized each other up with the wariness of territorial animals. "Sir," Austin said, extending his hand. "Thank you for allowing me to visit. I know it is unconventional, but I wanted to see Catherine again, and I wanted to meet the man who raised such a remarkable daughter." Thomas shook his hand, his grip firm despite his frailty. "Flattery is all well and good, young man, but I am more interested in your intentions toward my daughter." "Papa," Catherine protested, mortified. "It is all right," Austin said, meeting Thomas's gaze steadily. "It is a fair question, sir. I will not lie to you. I know we have not known each other long, but my intentions are entirely honorable. I care for Catherine a great deal, and I would like permission to court her properly." Thomas studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Come inside. Let us talk." The next hour was one of the longest of Catherine's life. She busied herself making coffee and preparing food while the two men talked in the front room, their voices too low for her to make out words. She caught glimpses of them through the doorway, saw her father's stern expression gradually softening, saw Austin speaking with earnest intensity about something she could not hear. Finally, her father called her in. Both men stood as she entered, and she looked between them anxiously. "Well?" she asked, unable to bear the suspense. "Austin has my permission to court you," Thomas said, "on the condition that everything is done properly. I will not have people talking about my daughter." Relief and joy flooded through Catherine. "Thank you, Papa." "Do not thank me yet," Thomas said, but there was a hint of amusement in his eyes. "I have also invited him to stay for dinner, so you two will have proper supervision." Austin stayed not just for dinner, but for the entire afternoon, helping Thomas with some repairs around the ranch that had been neglected during his illness. Catherine watched from the window as the two men worked together, saw the easy way they began to interact, and felt her heart swell with affection for both of them. Over dinner, Austin told stories that made even Thomas laugh, something Catherine had not heard in months. He asked intelligent questions about the ranch, offered suggestions without being pushy, and treated both Catherine and her father with genuine respect. When it was time for Austin to leave, Thomas shook his hand warmly. "You are welcome here any time, son, and I mean that." Catherine walked Austin to his horse, not wanting the day to end. "Thank you for coming, and for charming my father. I have not seen him smile this much in years." "I like him," Austin said. "He is a good man, and he clearly loves you very much." "I love him too," Catherine said. "He is all I have left." Austin reached out and took her hand. "Maybe not all," he said softly. They stood in the gathering darkness, hands clasped, and Catherine felt the weight of the moment. This was real, she realized. This was not just infatuation or loneliness or the drama of their first meeting. This was the beginning of something that could last, if they both had the courage to let it. "Austin," she said quietly, "I need you to know something. I am not looking for a casual romance. My heart, once given, is not easily taken back." "Good," Austin said, squeezing her hand. "Because I am not a casual man. When I commit to something, I see it through." He kissed her then, soft and sweet, and Catherine melted into it, wrapping her arms around his neck. When they pulled apart, both were breathing heavily. "I should go," Austin said reluctantly, Before your father comes out with a shotgun, Catherine laughed. He likes you, I could tell, but yes, you should go. Will I see you soon as I can manage, Austin promised. I will write every chance I get. The next few weeks fell into a pattern that Catherine cherished. Austin would visit whenever his duties at the Hammond Ranch permitted, sometimes staying for dinner, sometimes just stopping by for an hour in the afternoon. They would walk around her father's property, talking about everything and nothing, learning the small details about each other that transformed infatuation into something deeper. Catherine learned that Austin loved poetry but was embarrassed to admit it, that he had a scar on his ribs from a broken bottle his father had thrown at him when he was 12, that he dreamed of one day owning his own ranch, but thought it was probably impossible. Austin learned that Catherine was afraid of thunderstorms because her mother had died during one, that she could shoot almost as well as any man but hated killing anything, that she wanted children someday but worried she would not be a good mother. You would be a wonderful mother, Austin told her firmly. You are kind and patient and strong. Those are the things that matter. The letters between visits were equally precious. Austin's handwriting improved with practice, and his words became more confident, more revealing. He told her things in letters he seemed unable to say face to face, about his fears and hopes, and the way she made him want to be a better man. Catherine wrote back with equal honesty, opening her heart in ways she never had before. She told him about the lawn,